This episode of the Restoration Today podcast is brought to you by JobSite. JobSite is the platform built by contractors for contractors. With JobSite, you'll know exactly where your money is going, keep your team aligned, and finally get control of your jobs all in one program. Stop losing money on projects and start running your business with confidence. Book your demo today at jobsite.com. Hey restorers, welcome to an energetic episode of the Restoration Today podcast. I can tell that the guest that I'm bringing in today already has mega energy, so this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm very excited. I have Skip Jankoski with me. He's the owner of Purified Environments. We're going to be talking about kind of mold remediation, sensitized individuals, normie certifications, those kind of things. Maybe the influence climate change might be having. Lots of different things to talk about. This is actually really timely in my neck of the woods because I live in Michigan and we have had air quality alerts from the Canadian wildfires for days and days and days and days. It's just like orange outside. And I feel bad for all of the people that are sensitive to air quality issues because it is excessively bad here. And Skip, are you in California? You might have the same thing there. I'm going to toss it over to you to kind of introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background.
Yeah, hey Michelle. Yes, we operate in the Central Coast of California, Santa Barbara County, San Luis Obispo County, and Ventura County, and we have been known to have some unbelievable type of fire events. Yep. So yes, the air quality is a big concern. I'm the owner of Purified Environments, and we're going to get into that based upon the rapid fire question answer session that we're going to have here, because I am so excited to talk about the opportunity for this industry to start helping millions and millions of people. We'll get into that a little bit. I also serve on the national level. I'm a senior trainer with Normie. I teach the Normie Certified Remediator for Sensitized Individual. We have a training academy in Santa Barbara that people can take these classes. And let's see at the end of this session if people go, maybe I need to do that. Also serve on their President's Council, and also recently the director of the Normie Pro Management National Service Provider Network, because what we've been doing here in Santa Barbara for 6 years, and I know you wanted me to get into my background. Let me simplify it a little bit.
You're good.
I talked to my wife many years ago. I said, we need to get into the indoor air quality, blah, 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 for various reasons. Well, I spent over 20 years of my life in healthcare and medical diagnostics. So I have a very unique perspective on microbials or polymicrobial bacteria, mold spores, endotoxins, the whole 9 yards. And what I witnessed then, which was a precursor to me starting this Purified Environments, was the industry was overlooking something. And so we had, number one, a challenge with an extraordinary upside solution for everybody. The funny thing is, the literature now is confirmatory. I think you've seen that in the things that are being published in CNR.
Yep.
That people are going, hey, this is real. Yeah. And recently, Michael Pinto, Doug Hoffman, and I had a little think tank session that we videoed. There's a shift in the industry, and Pinto's been around. I call him Professor. Yeah. I am honored to be considering him as a colleague, and he as his colleague. Wonderful human being whose life work was saying what's in the containment area has to be done correctly, but that's not enough, especially for the population that we're going to be talking about a little bit today. So I've got a long background in medical device, part of which was, therapeutics, right? Yep. For Pfizer, when I was a high school science teacher, football and track coach.
Okay.
And my student athlete's dad came up to me at a track meet in the spring, and he goes, Mr. Jankoski. Yes, sir. He said, I understand that you're married and you're going to have a baby. Yes. How are you going to take care of that family on your teaching income? And this was back in the early 80s. So he said, meet me at the Howard Johnson's, 8 o'clock, and bring a resume. 3 months later, I was working for Pfizer. And that's where I formally took my, college knowledge degree, teaching experience. And I went, holy cow. Not only from what does this medication do to the human body? Why does that person need a particular medication? But also, how do you produce these therapeutics? They're produced in a clean room. Why are they produced in a clean room? Because there's all kinds of stuff that can adversely affect the final product. Guess what? Today, can I let you in on a secret? Today, we're talking about the same thing. If the house is a product and the
Yep.
person, that's supposed to be the therapy. It's supposed to be a sanctuary. Well, what we know is polymicrobial amplification is profound, profound in damp and wet buildings. And the EPA has said this, the CDC has said it, the NIH is saying it, right? All the stars are lining up. Such that what traditionally has been world-class standards dedicated to an area of water damage in a house, let's say kitchen. But what we now know, it is properly contained, proper PRV, post-remediation, everything's clean, everything done right, right? If performed correctly, because we got to put that big cat asterisk, if performed correctly,
Yep.
just cleared that space. It's now healthy. You take down the plastic, but you didn't address the migration of all of these microbes throughout the environment. I'm going to use a silly analogy for anybody that's going to be watching this. I'm acknowledging, this is a ridiculous scenario, but it's true. Chernobyl reactor 2, they clean it up. They get rid of all the bad stuff, right? Okay. What they didn't necessarily account for was the migration of that radiation out that area hundreds of miles away.
Yes.
In the context of what we're talking about, and the experts, this is what the experts say. Hey, look, you may have had a problem in the kitchen, or conversely, out in the master suite and bathroom area, and you took care of that, you adjust it properly by world-class standards. If you didn't decontaminate the rest of the environment, the person's still exposed. To the extent that, if you're a sensitized individual, we'll drill into that, meaning genetic predisposition on chromosome 6, HLA-DRDQ gene, right?
Yep.
That's what we know today. You know it because you see the literature, you're well-read, you're knowledgeable on that. They can go back into that house, open up their silverware drawer, which did not get decontaminated and disinfected appropriately, and they can spiral right back down in. And why is that? Because science has now confirmed that there's this thing called trained immunity, that once you get affected by this, the slightest dose, boom, and you're right back down, falling back down into the bottom of an empty well. And the recovery period is extraordinary. So that's why I'm excited about this. And at Normie, so we've been talking about this at Purified Environments for years. It's always been a health issue. It's never been just a mold issue. And you have to look at the whole environment. Normie has been teaching, for example, their high-level elite certification on this, how to do it right and what to recognize and what all these biomarkers mean and why is that important, right? Since 2021. So there are some companies out there. Sears X was founded in 2021, but Normie was teaching the certified remediation for the sensitized individuals since 2021. So I think they're a little bit further down this highway. But either way, that's why we're here. That's why I'm so excited for you to have said, hey, Skip, you want to chat about this a little bit?
Yeah.
Because what we're poised to do is, if you're in the harbor, we're going to raise the tide, and you're going to have more opportunity to do well. Because here's the deal. When I talk to people across the country, what they say is, I think the data, I think you guys are onto something here, because 3 to 4 out of 10 jobs that we do, people still complain that they're not feeling any better. Now, as a rule of thumb, unquestionably, we are not doctors. We heal buildings. We can talk about the medical implications of what you may be breathing in an indoor environment, which you cannot see, which we'll talk about, right? And so being able to understand this is of paramount importance. And here's the key for those that are in traditional remediation. Typically, it's a problem let's say it's a 3,000 square foot house, someplace in the United States of America. 3,000 square foot home, but you're dealing with a kitchen that may be 400 square feet. 2,600 square feet in that house is not being addressed.
Yep.
So you have an opportunity to work on the whole environment rather than a very small area. And now medical research, scientific peer-reviewed, says that has to be done. By the way, so does the EPA, so does the American Academy of Immunologists, so does the CDC, so does the NIH. They're all saying that the research now is conclusive enough that working on a small part of the environment isn't enough. for a subset of the population, not necessarily everybody, but I think it might become the new standard. So with that, I'm yapping away here. How am I doing so far?
You're doing great. It's an interesting conversation because, restorers understand, if you have smoke damage or a fire, that the smoke is going to travel throughout. You're going to have odor issues throughout the home. So the fact that, why would you not think that the mold spores have traveled, especially when there's HVAC systems that are just expediting it to other places in the house with little bursts of air. So it makes total sense to me. I am a little curious to follow up on something you said early on um, in your career path through diagnostics. I'm curious, and I know you might have to be careful what you share. What were you seeing there? Were you seeing people getting sick? Were you kind of looking for the common threads in some of the diagnostic tests that you were running? Like, what did you see that had you thinking, I think I want to go into this IAQ space?
Yeah, my company, my wife started our company back in 1993, and the parent company is Master Clean USA. So
Mhm.
we just do construction cleanup, white glove, move out, move in cleaning, new construction cleanup. We're out here in central coast of California, Santa Barbara, the Hollywood homes and so on and so forth, and the building contractors wanted pristinely clean environments.
Yeah.
And what they started to recognize is that when they were using other companies, the occupant just moving into a brand new 8,000, 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 square foot house started feeling funky.
Mm.
So I started drilling into it and I'm going, okay, so just started to do some research on this. Okay,
Mhm.
well, how is the environment determined to be cleaner, safer, healthier? And what I was finding is, A, no one was even doing indoor air diagnostic testing. They just weren't doing it. It was visual, visual. There was no dust, right? They put the white glove on, there's no dust here. But guess what? With what we're talking about here, you can have a dust-free environment and still have a grossly contaminated polymicrobial environment. Endotoxin, right? Actinobacteria, mycotoxins. And what taught us that you don't have to see something before you breathe it in order to have a risk? COVID, the pandemic. Nobody saw that SARS, you know,
Didn't
molecule
see the
come,
germ coming through the air from the other person next to you.
and they started to, right? Can't breathe that. No, you just breathed in the air.
Yeah.
And you breathe so much volume of air that there's so many studies out there that show what you breathe matters. I cite in the training, one of the things I talk about is Dr. William Nazaroff, Cal Berkeley, back in 2000 and I think 10 or 11, the effects of the sub 2 micron particle on the human lung and the associated illnesses and diseases that arise from that. And so this is what we're talking about. That's why I say the stars are lining up. The research is there. That's why all of these .govs or other types of entities are saying, it's pretty solid research, peer
Mhm.
review. And we've looked at it, we're scrubbing it, and we're going, yeah, this is a reality. We have to update because a lot of the standards that have not been updated that are currently in use are like from 2004, 2005. Lots have happened, right?
Yeah.
That's why I decided to get into it. So,
Okay.
and you can't tell, just like when you do infectious disease cleaning in a hospital,
Yep.
right? You do testing. You swab the surface for bacterial contamination because that's the only way you can tell. You
Yeah.
can't by looking at it. And staph and strep will live on stainless steel bed rails for 6 months, right?
Wow.
If not properly decontaminated, disinfected, and cleaned, then you got a problem. And that's why nosocomial infections, which we don't want to go down, the rate of which people acquire these secondary infections in hospitals have
Yes.
virtually been unchanged. So that's why I decided to get into it. And then when you start doing the data testing, the diagnostic testing, holy cow, the things that become eye-popping, and then you correlate them to human testing, right? Here's something that I think the viewers should understand. We get a lot of phone calls, probably 3 to 5 a week. My doctor thinks I have a problem in my house. Why? Because they did some testing on me and things don't look good. So I say to them, let me guess, your IgE, IgG, TGF beta 1, MMP9. I list some of the biomarkers and they go,
How do you know that?
leave this. How do you know this stuff? Well, because we're informed.
Hmm.
I understand what you're dealing with, and now I understand why your doctor is thinking there might be a problem in your environment based upon what you're breathing all day long, right? So It's a reality. We're not going backwards. We're only going to go forward.
Yep.
What we now know needs to be mainstream and common, new elevated standard of what to address in an indoor environment. Going back to that silly analogy, you can do a bang up job on reactor number 2, but you got to start dealing with the rest of it.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so you were kind of talking about standards and guidelines, things like that. So the National Institutes of Health, I think, recently had an update on water and fire damaged buildings. What that means. So what does that mean for the industry? What was that update?
Yeah, it was updated in April of 2025 and then again in July. So if you go to the NIH mold page, just a simple Google, you're going to see mold is everywhere in the environment. And depending upon who you are, the amount of exposure and the duration of exposure, you can basically get some type of symptoms traditionally associated with allergies. And I'll talk, in fact, I'm going to hit it right now. Allergies. Is that a sensitivity to mold? Absolutely. How many people are affected? Well, one of the things I also referenced in the class, in the Normie Certified Remediator class, is how many people are affected for a mold allergy. Quest Diagnostics 2011 Health Trends Analysis Report published in 2011 was a 10-year retrospective analysis going back the previous 10 years involving 1.5, ready for this one, billion patient interactions. So is that good data? Yeah. 30 cities across the United States, on average, 12% had confirmed mold allergies. Now, they also looked at food allergies, pet dander, that kind of stuff. 12% of the population. What's 12% of the population of the United States?
A lot.
A lot.
A lot.
A mold sensitivity from an allergy standpoint, right? So let's use Cincinnati, Ohio, because the first time I ever discussed this was what a lecture I did out in Cincinnati. Somebody hired me to go out there and talk about this stuff. Population of Cincinnati, Ohio, 350,000 people. 12% of the population had a mold allergy. That's 50,000 people. 50,000 people. So if you're in this industry and you're one particular company, this is why we're going to need a lot of people involved in this and to get knowledgeable. 50,000 environments need to be properly decontaminated. And we use decontamination as the new terminology. It's biotoxin decontamination because that's what these polymicrobials are. Mold spores, mycotoxins, actinomycetes, beta-glucans, endotoxins. It's all of it. So 50,000, that's my company, that's 100 years worth of work if we were the only one doing it. But those are environments. And so through public awareness, people go, you mean, wait a minute, I get this, I feel terrible. I have symptoms of fibromyalgia. I don't sleep well. I'm noticing that I'm a little bit more forgetful. And people think it's because they, consume too much alcohol, eat too many pizzas, right? Et cetera, but it's what they're breathing in their environment. So look at the number of people. So that plus the genetic aspect of it, which is about 25% of the population has that HLA-DQ gene on chromosome 6 that doesn't function properly. That's about 25. You put the two together, and you guys published my article on this a while back. That's about a third of the population of the United States. So we need everybody in the industry to understand that dealing with a small percentage of the home isn't enough, that we now know. We now know. You have a business transforming opportunity to be able to say, we can decontaminate your house from biotoxin toxicity. And it starts with the area that was water damaged, but here's the other kicker. Probably 80% of the houses don't require traditional remediation. Why? Because there's nothing damp, wet, or compromised. This is the accumulation of these microbials because of all the things you talked about a little bit. HVAC systems. HVAC systems engineered by brilliant people, but they were designed for comfort and temperature, right? They're principally designed for comfort, not infection or infectious control. And infectious control, it's not, are you infected by one of these biotoxins that you inhaled? Maybe you might be able to draw that conclusion, but that it's not enough. They're the lungs of the building, but they're not designed to completely eliminate
Yep.
the potential for these things to amplify. So you got to look at the whole structure. Just like if you go to the doctor, right?
Yep.
You go to the doctor and you're waiting in the waiting room for an hour. He'll be with you right, in a few minutes, and then they take you back to the waiting room and you wait another hour, right? And then finally the doctor comes in and the first thing they do is they put a blood pressure cuff on you. Why? Right? As opposed to, I mean, you wouldn't want a doctor who walked in and said, hey, guess what? You need a double knee replacement and a mitral valve replacement, and turns around and closes the door. You'd be sitting there going, okay. Some people will go, okay, I guess I do. Others are going to go, wait, you didn't even touch me. You didn't do any diagnostic testing. So there's relevancy in that, right?
Yes, there absolutely is. So, all right, so talking about treating these sensitized individuals, do you see any sort of standards on the horizon or any sort of like more formalized protocols? I'm interested. This is kind of a two-part question, I guess. You mentioned COVID earlier, and this isn't a public health issue, which it should be. The amount of the population, I can even think of the number of small children that I see with chronic health issues related to their lungs and breathing and stuff like that. It is so common. I have two young children. They have many friends that seem to have issues, and I always, when I see them, I'm like, I wonder if it's their environment. I can't help thinking that based on what I know. But so do you see more formal protocols on the horizon, and do you have any take on, could this become a public health issue at some point? Should it be?
Yeah, great question. Great question. Dr. Jordan Peterson, people have heard about, many people, I'm sure, who are going to be watching this have heard of him. He was on a podcast a couple of years ago with two prominent researchers on the subject. And he said, looking at the data, this is bigger than asbestos, lead paint, and the pandemic combined. Am I too far off on that? And the two researchers said, you're spot on. This is the single biggest public health issue associated today. Now, why can we say that? Right? 20% of all Alzheimer's patients are categorized as atypical Alzheimer's. Environmental and completely treated, it's because of this quote unquote inhalation of these polymicrobials. It's mycotoxin related, it's mold spore related, it's actinobacteria related, because the biotoxin pathway, once it gets triggered, depending upon what it is, and I don't want to get down that pathway too much, it's, this firestorm of inflammation. And everybody in the medical field today would say that inflammation is bad for you. You got biohacking, metabolic code popping up all over the country, right? And they're looking for what are the markers that indicate inflammation, so on and so forth, right? So there's 20% of all Alzheimer's completely treatable, or it looks like it's a treatable scenario. 20%, right? Number two, now the research is coming out that shows possibly Parkinson's may have an aspect of this microbial contamination in an indoor environment. Autism may. Now, I'm not a doctor. All I'm saying is the research is being conducted, and there are lines being drawn that with a question mark that said, is this possibly something other than what we thought it was? And the answer to that is it's pointing in the right direction. Yes, it could be something completely different that's causing these things, because your immune system, once it gets triggered and that inflammation starts, it causes lots of problems. For example, who would have thought that inhalation of mycotoxins today is directly associated with a brain injury?
Hmm.
And that's confirmed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a thing out there called MRI brain scan with Neuraquant, and Neuraquant now, which has been proven in federal court as a precedent, that inhalation of mycotoxins and or mold exposure directly correlates to a brain injury. Period. End of story. It's not questioned anymore. So look at again, I go back to look at everything you can now begin to comprehend, understand it, and have the ability to go into some of these people's homes and say, have no fear, the right company is here, right? And that means all companies that are in the industry that have this new standard. And here's the new standard. Normie, I played a role in the establishment to my knowledge, the first ever medical advisory board.
Mm-hmm.
Medical advisory board was involved in the creation of or authoring or editing or adding to the Normie Level 4 protocol, which they find to be the highest, an elevated standard within the industry because it incorporates the entire environment, what you need to look for. What is a normal level of mold in a house? You want to talk about that? How long have you been doing this? There is no standard. The only one who has a published standard, what's a normal level of mold, is Normie. And their normal level of Aspergillus penicillium in an indoor environment, regardless of what your exterior control sample says, is 200.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because the EPA, through many papers, has said you start to get above 200, that could be a problem. And so for the person in the remediation industry who looks at a test from somebody and says, well, you've got 1,500 Aspergillus inside, you get 25,000 Aspergillus outside, oh, you're okay because the inside is less than the outside. I'm really simplifying this. That's not the matrix anymore, because there's no lower threshold. We know this. The EPA has also published, conversely, there is no lower threshold for contamination depending upon who you are. So one Aspergillus penicillium, if you want to take it to the finite, can cause somebody to have a problem. So yes, the elevated standards are in place today, have been, and more people have a decision to make. Do I want to know this stuff or not? Is it complex? Yeah. Is it complicated? No.
I have a friend in the industry. You're talking about the MRIs and things you can see. She had mold spores like behind her eyes that you can see. She has actually the like scans of it that show, which was crazy, and it caused her a whole lot of health problems. And they didn't know why, didn't know why, didn't know why, and eventually figured it out and saw what she had. I don't know, crazy. She works in the industry still, but
Yeah. Yeah. So let me address that because it's mind-boggling what these researchers have been able to do. Now, these are researchers that are looking under a microscope. These are researchers that are looking at data, right, for years and years and years and years and years. Somebody on on one of our certification re-education sessions a couple of weeks back, because we have them every Tuesday night at Normie, said, how quickly can you see physical changes in a person who is susceptible? And let's talk about the biotoxin illness, mold illness. Some people call it SEERS. Some people call it mold-associated inflammatory syndrome or chronic inflammatory response syndrome, right? How fast do you see a body react to something depending upon that individual's, makeup? And here's the response by the chair of our medical advisory board, Dr. Andrew Heyman, who, by the way, is going to be teaching the Normie Level 4 protocol to doctors at George Washington University, and is also offering trade classes so they understand, what does this IgE, IgG biomarker mean? What does this TGF-beta1 biomarker mean? What about this MMPA? So I'm starting to digress. By the way,
perfect.
just kick me under the screen here if I'm talking and yabbering too much.
Nope.
I just have a tremendous passion for this.
I can tell, and that's good. Talk a little bit about because you've mentioned Doug and I know Lance, and I'm familiar with Normie, but this is kind of a basic question, but fill people in on what Normie is, because you mentioned that you have the training academy in California, but there's also facilities in Florida, and there's a lot of opportunities within Normie. So pivot a little bit and talk about Normie.
Okay, well, let me address the how fast does somebody respond to a toxin that they've inhaled.
Yeah.
They know that within minutes to adjusting your friend behind the retina, minutes to hours, these molds and biotoxins start to plant in the eye behind the retina, and your vision starts to change, even if it's noticeable. Within 2 weeks to a month, your genetic expression changes.
Wow.
That's inflammation. So it's just real.
Yeah.
Okay. So Normie, National Organization of Remediators and Microbial Inspectors, has been at the forefront of this, in my humble opinion, and for what it's worth, for quite some time. One of its lead trainers, I call him Professor Michael Pinto.
Yes.
His life work is centered around this, that you got to be looking at the house like a clean room environment, right? to the hospital and clean my diagnostics. So he and I, we're like two peas in a pod over this stuff, and we salivate over how can we increase, the classes. But he's been teaching this sensitized individual since 2017, formally incorporated in the normie certification aspect for those who have an awareness and want it to be able to have a higher level unique credential or certification. So yes, normie has been, and by the way, normie certification, normie was founded in 20 years ago. And Doug Hoffman, the executive director, actually received a phone call from the state of Louisiana and said, we want to implement some laws here to make sure that mold assessing and mold remediation can be certified and regulated. Can you put something together? Sure. And so normie was founded and taught certified mold remediator, certified mold assessor, and then a litany of class. I mean, I call it the University of Normie. And by the way, in the 5 areas of the country that have regulations, the normie certification is the only one unanimously accepted in those states that have certification or regulatory oversight. So what normie has been doing has been looking at this slightly differently from the industry. IICRC, world-class standard, no question about it. The science behind drying out a water damaged building component is unrivaled, but it stops there. And it doesn't address the building, how the building was built. What does that, like you or I, how were we made whereby we had a susceptibility to something in our life that we never even knew, right? It's like looking at that structure. What are the drainage planes on the structure, right? What drainage planes, some people automatically think, what's the grading? Does the hillside slope into the building, or does the building exist such that the landscape flows away from the building for groundwater? Well, that's one aspect of drainage planes. Another one is, how is your siding put on? How is the roof deck? How is the chimney flashed? How are your gutters established? Do you have this? Do you have that? Are you putting in oversized HVAC systems, right? What's the SEER rating on your heat pump? That's how normie attacks it. It looks at holistically from the building. Why, Mr. and Mrs. Smith calls you out there every 3 years and said, my building is wet again. Well, there's a reason for it. It's the way it's been structured. So normie talks about this. The standard on the NCRSI, we educate folks who want to be educated on what all of this stuff means to the sensitized individual. We talk about this is looks like somewhere around 100 million people are affected. That yes, it's critical that the area of building compromise, that water damage area, kitchen, bathroom, exterior wall, plumbing leak in a wall, right? That get properly addressed as per the IICRC, but the rest of the structure, right, requires sanitization protocol. And if it's not done right, that person isn't going to get any better. So, this is what has to happen. This is how you deal with the sum total of the rest of the body of the structure of the environment. And it includes lots of things, including the HVAC system. It includes in the incorporation of other things to maintain this new baseline of reduced biotoxin decontamination. And does it work? Yeah, it absolutely works. First of all, this, the notion that if somebody has mold sickness, get out of that environment, leave your home. And here's what the data shows. If the environment isn't properly decontaminated, nobody stands a shot at getting better. Yeah. If it's done right, it looks like this is empirical, but it looks like if it's done properly, you're left with about 20% who are not going to recover. It looks just like long COVID. So 8 out of 10 people have a shot at having their life back. And when you talk about, the worst of the worst, that quote unquote SEERS confirmed patient, we've done 12, 14 in the last 2 years back here in Santa Barbara. It's our forte. They've had traditional remediation in the past. Maybe they've had another water event, but when you knock on the door, this is a reality. I can't even begin. I'm not making this up. Push the doorbell. Ding, 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 ding. Is that you, Skip? Yeah, it's me, Skip, Purified Environments. Come on in. You go in, and the homeowner is laying down on a couch because they don't have the energy to get up. Their joints hurt, their this hurts, their that hurts, they can't think this. Come on in, and then you have I literally go over and their little kitchen chair and start talking to them. When did this happen? 10 years ago. How long did it sit? Before 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we had everything taken down to the studs, and I've never recovered. Okay, so we start doing some diagnostics and this, that, and everything else, and then you properly treat the environment. And the next time I go back over there after all the work has been done, which is predominantly because our work did not require any remediation, right? Ding, ding, they open up the door, they hug you. I can't believe this. I mean, energy like what? It's Jekyll and Hyde in a nice way. Here's somebody who couldn't get off the couch, now is jumping up and down. My fibromyalgia, my this, my that, my biomarkers have normalized. The doctor said, whatever you did, keep it that way. So this is the opportunity that we have. And again, it's a huge one. Mm-hmm. You got to understand the why. Yeah. Why does this have to happen? And if you're a business that is in that water damage abatement or traditional mold remediation, you can solve the underlying, because this is where our medical advisory board has said, you know what, you're the first responder. Whatever I do clinically to help this person is secondary to getting their environment properly decontaminated, because they don't stand a shot at recovery. Can they get a little bit better if they're still in a contaminated environment? Yeah. But optimally, if their environment is fixed, they will get better. 8 out of 10 will. So you should feel comfortable starting to talk to them a little bit about the medical aspect of this. It's what you're breathing. And did your doctor test any of the biomarkers? Did you have an MRI with Neuroquant? If you're in the industry and you know this, even you have an awareness of it, you don't have to have this high level, mm-hmm. I'm not a doctor. That's above my pay grade, right? My brain gets turned on enough just to be dangerous. So that's all we're asking people from the normie side. Be dangerous with your knowledge so that you can help somebody, because these people need help. And there's a lot of them.
Okay, so I know that I have a question that I know that my audience is going to have, because this is a hot topic right now in the industry. This is obviously an area that, like you said, water and mold companies can step into for certain. How often is this covered by insurance? How often is it private pay? What are you finding there? I know that, carriers and adjusters already give a lot of pushback on kind of the more mainstream. I don't know what to call it. This should be mainstream and it's not, which is part of the problem. So I could see there being kind of additional pushback. So what are you seeing there as far as getting paid?
Guess what? We at Purified Environments in California over the last 6 years did 2 insurance jobs.
Yeah. 2.
And why is that? Number one, because either the client, because insurance in California is an interesting topic.
Yes. Could be multiple podcasts all by itself. We'll steer clear of that one, I guess, because that's
Yeah. Well, they don't want to have to pay their deductible, because that means they may not be able to get reinsured again.
Yep.
So they go, okay. But more importantly, you realize, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, this is a health issue. It's not a mold issue. It's a health issue. And because it's a health issue, and because the doctor has already said, I think you got a problem here. The pathway to solving the problem has been clearly illuminated, and they are on board. The problem with the insurance companies is that even for most of the industry has tied their business to insurance, because it's a water damage problem, right? And then the water damage problem, look, the second floor bathroom toilet overflowed, right? Well, we know that that's a certain condition of hazardous water, yep. Contaminated water, right? Yep. No, that wasn't a condition 3. It's a condition 1. It's a condition 1. So you got to fight them all the time. So here's the beautiful thing about what Normie's doing, and if I could talk about that on the national level. The whole point, and I am the director of the Normie Pro Management National Service Provider Network. And what we're doing is we're going to have credentialing oversight and establish this new higher standard and get people really comfortable about understanding what this means so that these companies aren't dealing with insurance predominantly. A part of it might be on a particular job, but they go from that 300 or 400 square foot kitchen to the rest of the 26 or 2,700 square feet in the house. So that's a business transforming opportunity in and of itself, outside of it. But here's what we're doing. We're aligned with a healthcare through the establishment of our medical advisory board. And part of that, what we're doing on the national level is building recruitment data and healthcare recruitment data that we are sending back into. We already have a CRM where our intake department is talking to people who are finding us. My doctor says, okay, now we've established the proprietary and confidential nature of any of that history. Because people are uploading their medical records, they're uploading diagnostic testing that somebody did, or we're suggesting for others. But what we're doing is we're going to be collecting data points so that the medical advisory board research aspect of this is going to be publishing data on thousands and thousands of structures across the country, including health conditions of occupants within these contaminated buildings, such that the future goal is that the insurance companies or healthcare providers say, you know what? We need to start having a health plan for this. We need to write, the goal, simply stated, a doctor says, Mrs. Smith's house requires biotoxin decontamination, and one of the two insurance sides is going to have something to address it, because that's how big it is. That's what we're doing, and nobody else is doing it. No one is even close to even thinking about doing that. So we only want somebody who really understands this to be dealing with that person who needs that kind of help. The data that we're archiving, either the environmental testing, such as what is the Hertz Me 2 score, what is the actinobacterial contamination level. A lot of people don't understand this jargon, but the labs have already said, the research has said, if your endotoxins are under 100, that's a relatively low risk. If it's over 100, you have a contaminated environment, just on an endotoxin. And by the way, an endotoxin isn't even a whole bacterial cell, it's a fragment of a cell, and that's what can drive the inflammatory response in a human being. In fact, here's what the data shows, and this is where most of the industry, most of the industrial hygienists, most of the indoor environmental testing companies don't even look for. Here's what the data suggests. If you have that quote unquote SEERS, biotoxin illness, mold associated inflammatory, 7 to 10% of the patient population, their inflammatory response is triggered by mold or mycotoxins. 7 to 10%. 42% actinobacteria. 28% endotoxins. It's not just a mold problem. And mold isn't a mold problem, it's a health problem. And so that's what we now know. This is decades. And when we talk about biotoxins, let me mention this. The term biotoxin toxicity, this is not a new term. You can go back in the literature, and in the 80s and 90s and 70s, people were talking about this stuff. But it's mainstream now because the literature is profoundly voluminous on what these environments. Lots of studies from 2009, 10, 11. Lots of things are produced in a water damaged building, and they don't stay in the area of where the water damage was identified. They migrate everywhere through regular, normal. You don't have to take a hurricane fan, get stuff to move on. You know this, right? How many people don't? How many people don't? You know this. This is, wow.
Yeah.
Transformative. And I understand this. I've said this before. I think the industry is shifting. We're in the middle of a shift right now. This industry is going to be. If you don't want to be a part of it, cool. I get it. It's a comfort factor. You'll be a water damage abatement company. biotoxin decontamination of the rest of the environment, and then incorporating things that maintain this new level, such as air purification, properly designed HVACs, more fresh air makeup, HRVs and ERVs, depending upon who that person is, right? You're going to be a biotoxin decontamination professional, and you're going to be working on something other than 300 square feet in a house or just a crawl space, right? It's huge, and it's the right thing to do. And look, you've heard this before. Lots of people have said it. People want to do business with those they like and trust.
Mhm.
If more people in the industry can have this kind of conversation, yeah, I understand what the IgE, IgG, and biomarkers, and I understand this. I understand what you're going through. You've just established trust. And then how do you go about fixing it? Well, we know how to do that, and we teach you how to do it. It's complex, but not complicated. We can give you the ability to do this. And this is where the industry is going. So time is now.
The time is now. I love it. Okay, so before we wrap it up, I want to one point people towards your article on CNR. So it was published in the May June issue, which I actually have a print copy here right next to me. But it was in, I believe, the May June issue, and you can also find it on the website if you search for Skip's name. And you talk about healing millions and how our industry can help heal millions, which is what you were just alluding to. So give the restorers who are listening, who do want to step into this, because you also just mentioned that maybe you don't want to, but if you do, a pointer or two of here's the direction to go to start having these conversations with your customers.
Yeah. The first thing I would do is take a look at what we're doing on the national level.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This new, we have a medical advisory first ever done.
Mm-hmm.
And number one, at the national level through the NOMI Pro Management initiative, yes, as a requisite requirement, you got to have these certification classes. You're just looking for money. No, we want to give you knowledge, because what you'll be able to tell somebody is, I have the most elite credentials in the industry. And by the way, I had to sign an ethical document that said I will adhere to this. And it's not going to be my personal thought about what has to happen. We know that, they're very vetted. You'll be able to say, perform under the auspices of a medical advisory board. Put that on your website. But you have to get trained, and what we're looking for is people to apply to become part of the National Service Provider Network. Because what we want here, and it's not everybody, but what we want is certification, oversight, and we want performance, on-the-job performance oversight, so that that client knows. Just like if you go to the doctor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't see graduated med school from such and such and such and such, you might want to get treated by that person. Okay, they could be knowledgeable. On the other hand, if you go in and you see they graduated from here, 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 and here, and they have the credentials, that's what the public is going to want to see.
Yep.
We can help you out there. Does it require an investment? Well, sure it does. Before you even got into the business, you had to go get an IICRC
Yes.
certification. You had to go take a class, you had to get certified, and then you got on the job and you started to learn a heck of a lot. My grandfather, when I graduated from college, and I'm holding that degree, he goes, "What does that mean?" "It means I'm out of here, Gramps." He goes, "No, it means you still got a lot to learn."
This is true.
And as long as you're willing to learn for the rest of your life, you'll be able to make positive changes. One of the greatest pieces of advice is, I didn't realize it at the time, but here I sit today, and my brain, every morning, I turn it on. Every day, here's my mission. I got to do everything I can to help people who want to know this stuff so that they can go help and heal millions of buildings so that the occupants have a pathway for recovery. Because that's what the literature says. Where they're living, where they're residing, is the principal source of, or the correlation can be made that this is an environmentally induced illness. And if you fix that environment and keep it that way, they have a pathway to get better. And all we have in life is our friends and our health, our loved ones and our health. And when people have the opportunity to want to do this. Is it complicated? Complex? Yes. Is it complicated? No. It's about teaching and wanting to be a part of this.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. let's wrap it up with a story. It's always my favorite question. So a story that shows the importance of this work. I'm sure you have many, but maybe one of your favorite.
Yeah, I would say um, the one I used a little bit earlier, the person I showed up, they couldn't even,
Laying on the, yeah.
and then every single one of them, to a person, all of them have significant improvements. We have, let me tell you, I'll give you the principal example of why we need to look at this and why we have to take it seriously. About a month and a half ago, I went to the East Coast to do an environmental assessment on somebody's home who's a very prominent physician, diagnosed with Sears, positive MRI brain scan. 2 years ago, walking through the neighborhood with their spouse at the end of the day, jogging, everything else, got sick. Within a year, can't walk without a walker, can't walk without crutches. And by their own admission, they're looking at 4 to 6 months of being in a wheelchair for the rest of their life. That's what this illness does. Previously assessed by somebody who didn't look for the things that I looked for. I found gross contamination, endotoxins, actinobacteria, all right? Other types of diagnostic testing. We know now what needs to happen. And this person stands an 80% chance of recovery. Could hopefully not part of the 20%.
Yep.
But this is somebody who said, if I can get any use, this is still a 50-year-old person, right? They're not 85. And who cares if they were 85 or 105? If you can fix their environment and give them more time to be with their loved ones, that's what matters.
Yes.
So understanding this stuff is important, and the recovery. So that's somebody who's today can't walk without a walker because of what they've been breathing in their indoor environment.
Mm-hmm.
Other people, where you solve the environment, I mean, that could, for those in the industry, that could be your mother, your father, your son, your daughter, your Uncle Joe.
Yep.
It hits home because there's so many people affected by this. Yep. It's cuckoo crazy. So when we clear an environment and someone gets better, maybe they're not like they were 20 years ago. Okay, but they say, you know what? I don't know, this is amazing. I can't believe it's what I was breathing for all those years. Mm-hmm. That's the upside on this. So from the standpoint of that individual who can't walk anymore, who says, if I can get any use of my leg again, this is a home run. I don't want to be in a wheelchair, and I'd like not to be able to use crutches and a walker anymore. Yeah. This is what we're talking about. And it hits home. And like I said, it could be anyone that you know. It could be your neighbor. It could be one of your family members. It could be a distant cousin. That's what the data, 100 million people. It's 100 million people between genetic and the more allergic side of this equation. So the upside is extraordinary. And it's a business transformation opportunity for people that are in the industry. This is not, I'm not making this stuff up. It's a reality. You're seeing it with all the articles being published. You're seeing the medical journals publishing this stuff. It's now time for us to act on it, which is what principally my article dealt with. Yes. That the opportunity is now, but you got to know how to do it. And we're, at the Normie level, we're uniquely positioned to help you understand what you need to do so your business can do better for more people. And that's what it comes down to. It's not just water damage anymore. It's biotoxin decontamination. Sounds really complicated. It's not.
Perfect. Well, Skip, thank you so much. And thank you for the article. Final shout out to Michael for introducing us. Michael and Susan are some of the first people I met when I joined the industry a decade ago, and they are just gems. So I appreciate them both. And thank you so much for your time and the article and the work that you're doing. And I look forward to sharing this podcast.
Yeah, every day I wake up, I want to help people. This is something you can be doing in your respective marketplaces. Yep. You can make a difference in the ability for them to enjoy life rather than being beaten down by it. That's really what it is. I mean, it's really cool. I am so honored to be on this with you today. Thank you for the work that you're doing. in getting people to present data and publishing it and working towards the objective of getting the industry more knowledgeable so that they can help more people, because boy, oh boy, is it a requirement.
It is. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, sir. Hope you have an awesome rest of your day.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Anything I can do to help.
For more Restoration Today and the latest news, visit our website, cnrmagazine.com, and find the latest episodes of the Restoration Today podcast on your favorite podcasting platform.